We continue the shiur in Gemara. The Gemara says that David HaMelech, before he became king, he was a boy who came to visit his brothers at the field of battle by the order of his father. His father's name was Yishai, David ben Yishai. And at that time, Goliath, confronted the Jews, slandering them, insulting Kaviyachol Hashem, challenging the Jews to select one to do battle with him, and the Jews were filled with fear. King Shaul said, I offer anyone who will go out and defeat Goliath in battle, I offer him my daughter plus a tremendous prize. No one accepted that offer. Now King David came, he heard the cursing of Goliath, and he said, bring me to King Shaul because I will face Goliath in battle. When he was brought there, Shaul was very curious, King Shaul. He said, I want to find out about this boy. The reasons were, first, who was his father? And they said, his father is Yishai. That too began to displease King Shaul. Why was he afraid? He saw that King David had a demeanor about him, an air of royalty. So automatically he was jealous. He was afraid that he would take over the kingdom. He asked, of whom is King David a descendant? We know that the kingdom will belong to the tribe of Yehuda. Yehuda had two sons with Tamar. The time that Tamar put a veil over herself, pretended to be an illegal woman, Yehuda married her. We call that story the Chumash. She gave birth to twins, Peretz and Zerach. They knew that the kingdom would come from the family of Peretz, not from the family of Zerach. Peretz means one who breaks through by force. A king has a right to break through anything by force. He can take anything he wishes. So he said, is he descendant of Peretz or Zerach? If he's from Peretz, I'm in danger. Zerach, I'm safe. But he told me he's the son of Yishai, and this displeased King Shaul because Yishai, the Yevamos says, was so pure that he never committed a sin in his life. Yishai was one of those 4 people who died because of the sin, the act of the Nachash, the serpent who persuaded Chava Adam to eat from the tree of wisdom. This brought the angel of death to the world. So the reason that Yishai died was because of the story of the serpent, not because of any sin he committed. That's how pure he was. He never committed a sin in his life. That was one thing. However, Yishai was also an officer in the army of King Shaul, and Yishai, he was younger apparently, Yishai would lead into battle a large contingent, some say as much as 600,000 Jewish soldiers in the battle, and in the thickest of battle, he would never lose a man. No man serving under him would ever die. Which means his zechut was so great that in battle, not one of his subordinates would be in danger, which is a tremendous zechut. Covers not just himself, but also his soldiers. This made King Shaul fear King David even still more. So he said, let him put on clothes to armor to go out and battle Goliath, and he gave him his armor. King Shaul was taller than anybody else. He was known for his height. He was a head above the tallest of men. King David was short. How can you put the armor of King Shaul, his garments, on King David? And yet, when King David put them on, the Yevamos says, Madav, it means it fit exactly. Which means that these garments were made for a king, and they were so perfect for King David, showing that he had royal blood in him. This made him worry still more. Now he had a problem. what to do with this King David. So there arose now a man named Doeg, an evil person, who said to King Shaul, rather than ask about his background, why don't you first find out whether he's fit to ever be king? Whether he's fit not just to be king, but whether he's fit to be a Jew. Can he be a Jew? King Shaul asked why. He said because he is the great-grandson of Ruth. Ruth comes from the Arab tribe of Moab. The Torah tells us, there's a pasuk in the Chumash where Hashem said, never accept a convert from the two nations of Ammon and Moab. These two we will never accept as Jews. Why? Because when the Jews were in the desert going to Israel, they pleaded with Ammon and Moab to give them some type of food, so to help them out with just small items, and Ammon and Moab refused to help them at a time like that because they showed their cruelty. Therefore Hashem said we will not accept them into the Jewish ranks, Jewish nation. Even if they want to convert, they're turned away. Ruth came from Moab. That means that her conversion was illegal. King David is a descendant of Ruth, therefore he's not a Jew. So why worry about whether he's fit to be king? The most important point is that he's not even a Jew, then you're not in jeopardy. Then Abner, that was the general of King Shaul, who later became King David's general, rose up and said, but we have a rule we learned. We learned this from, as was discovered later, we learned it from Shmuel Hanavi, prophet. The pasuk says, Lo yavo Ammoni u'Moavi. An Ammonite and a Moabite cannot come into the Kahal of the Jews, Kahal of Hashem. This is only Moavi, a male Moab, from Moab, a male from Ammon, but a female is accepted. And why so? Because the first question asked, the Doeg, the Yevamos says, was very, very learned, very sharp. He was so sharp that in learning he was far above most of the Chachamim at that time. Because he was evil, the Yevamos says later on that he is one of those few who never got to Gan Eden. He's one of the four listed as having no chelik in Olam Haba. Not only that, but in fact the Yevamos tells us that because of his knowledge, Hashem wanted to have him have Olam Haba. Hashem said to King David, let me, Kaviyachol, allow me to give him Gan Eden. And King David prayed to Hashem and said, no, I don't want him in heaven at all. He should be destroyed. That's how bad he was because of Lashon Hara that he spoke and so on. And as we said, he was very learned and wise. So when Avner gave this answer, the rule is only a male and not a female, because it says Moavi, Ammoni, male. So Doeg very wisely said, if that's the case, you can apply that same theory to a different pasuk. It says Lo Yavo Mamzeh. A Mamzeh cannot be accepted in the ranks of the Jews. Well, the pasuk says Mamzeh. That means that a female Mamzeh is accepted. If you apply that to mean only male, Mamzeh, it should be kasher. And if you say that the word Mamzeh, though it's male, applies to all, male and female, then you must say also that Moavi means, we use that male term, but it means anyone coming from Moab, male or female. And therefore, again, this would mean that King David is not accepted as a Jew. So the Yevamos says that he answered, and Maseh, another one answered, it doesn't matter what you say. We already have a rule set down by Shmuel the prophet, who was the ruling power, the chief rabbi, who said only male and not female. And since not female, therefore King David coming from the female from Ruth, he is kasher. The Gemara asks, why is there a difference? What is the actual reason? Why do we say in the case of Ammoni there's a difference between male and female, and by Mamzer we don't? Why do we differentiate between male and female in the case of Ammon and Moab? The answer is because the reason that Ammon and Moab are rejected as Jews is because they were cruel and refused to give food to the Jews. This point of going out, greeting the Jews, the wanderers, giving them food, this is possible only for men. It's not tzniut. Women to come out and greet soldiers. Therefore, since they were the ones who were guilty and not fulfilling this kindness, the men, the Gezerah, the decree is only against men, not women. Since women are exempt, therefore Ruth HaMoaviyah is kasher. Which means that King David was legally a Jew and perfect. Then the Gemara says that there's a pasuk in Tehillim which says Pitachta Lamos Seirai. We say that in Hallel, prayer of Hallel. He then said, Hashem, you opened up the bind that tied me. Asur means to be bound. Asur means forbidden. Hashem, you opened up something which is forbidden, you permitted it. Mos Seirai is plural. Permitted it twice in my case. Once, my own case, myself, because you allowed one who comes from, a female that comes from Moab, you permitted her to be accepted as a Jew, which means that I am kasher. In the second case, you permitted my son, Shlomo HaMelech, too, to have a kosher son. How? Midrash says, to add to what the Gemara says, one day King Solomon had to build a Bet HaMikdash. He had to get that special worm called a shamir. In order to cut the stones without metal, they had a special worm that could cut these stones. It was so powerful, just like placing it on a rock, it caused the rock to split. But how do you find that shamir? Only Ashmedai, the king of the Shedim, knew where it was. So he had to first capture Ashmedai. How do you capture the king of the Shedim, who has heavenly powers, like an angel, who has the powers of infinite speed, who has the powers of transforming himself to anything he wishes, who has the power of destruction, where just by a blow he can destroy the entire world? How can a human overpower Ashmedai? The answer is that King Solomon Shlomo had a ring. On this ring was carved out the special name of Hashem, which was so powerful that it could subdue Ashmedai. If he showed this ring, and if he placed a collar around his neck, also with the same name of Hashem, that way he became tamed and subservient. And through a long process, he finally captured Ashmedai, brought him to the palace, and then, after he got the shamir, everything was fine. Problem arose, what do we do with Ashmedai now? Ashmedai was burning mad, looking for revenge. If he'd released Ashmedai would kill King Solomon. So it was like holding a tiger by the tail. He couldn't keep him, he can't release him, he has to keep him. So he kept him imprisoned. One day Ashmedai said to Shlomo HaMelech, you consider yourself ruler of the upper worlds, the lower worlds, upper worlds meaning the worlds of the spiritual, the Shedim. Why do you keep me tied? Are you afraid of me? This was sort of a challenge, teasing. There Shlomo HaMelech said, of course not, no problem. He said, all right, fine, and release me and show that you feel us. This was a mistake which Shlomo did. He released him, and immediately Ashmedai showed his power. He rose up to a tremendous height. He took Shlomo HaMelech, he took off his ring, took the ring for himself, and he threw Shlomo HaMelech for many hundreds of miles. He landed safely, softly, but at that moment, Ashmedai converted himself, transformed himself to Shlomo HaMelech, who he took over the throne. Shlomo went around in exile. Wherever he went, he said, Ani Kohelet, I am Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon. In each place he was ridiculed. He was considered insane. This lasted for 3 years. It was 3 years of exile to pay for his thinking himself immune or all-powerful. the end of those 3 years, the Gemara tells how he finally got back and how Ashmedai was gotten rid of. But the point is, what happened in those 3 years? This part is omitted. The Midrash says that he went around continually ridiculed and powerless because he did not have that ring. What happened to the ring? Ashmedai took the ring, swallowed it at first, and later, when he removed it, he threw it into the sea. The sea is so vast that it's apparently lost forever. A fish swallowed that ring, and that was the end of it. Meanwhile, Shlomo traveled from city to city, from land to land, and wherever he went, he cried, "I am King Solomon." Always people running after him as though he was insane. And to a degree, his mind became sort of beset by these worries and troubles, this harassment. He went into a case of depression of mind. He was very depressed. Let's not forget that Shlomo possessed the appearance, looks that were second to none. Besides his wisdom, he also had an appearance that was so overpowering that he could appeal to anyone. He came finally to the land of Ammon, this Arab land of Ammon, and he got himself a position as a waiter in the king's palace. The king's daughter, whose name was Naamah, saw Shlomo Melech, and of course, by when she set eyes upon him, she wanted him for a husband. And she told her father that she wants Shlomo Melech for a husband. Her father became so incensed, so infuriated, that he said, "You and he both must die. How can I kill my own child with my hands? Therefore, I will let you be killed by yourselves. I'm going to send you off to a distant island, a jungle. There, the forces of nature will take care of you. You'll both die there yourselves." So he exiled both Shlomo Melech and Naamah to this island. There they stayed. Naamah still maintained this affection for Shlomo Melech throughout this difficult ordeal. And one day, while they were at the beach on this island, she fished out this fish from the sea, prepared to cook it. She opened it and found this ring of Shlomo Melech. The minute she gave him this ring, he put it on, and he regained his greatness. This is how he returned to the palace. He got back his kingdom, but he felt a sense of gratitude and an obligation to Naamah. For this, he converted Naamah, took her for his main wife, and Naamah gave birth to Rechavam. Rechavam was the one who took over the kingdom after Shlomo HaMelech. He was his main son who ruled as king after Shlomo HaMelech. Now the question is, Rechavam was the son of a woman who was an Ammonite. If Ammon is not accepted as a Jew, that means that he was not a legal Jew because the child follows the mother. But King David says in Tehillim, King David says, "B'tachta ramos seidai." You released us from two items that are asur. You opened these binds. One, that a Moabite, a woman from Moab, may be converted. Therefore, Ruth is kasher. I am a descendant of Ruth. I too am kasher. Ammon, too, the same rule. Only a male Ammoni is asur as a Jew, but a female is permissible, making Naamah, the wife of Shlomo HaMelech, kasher. Therefore, his son Rechavam, who took over the kingdom after him, is kasher. These two items you did for me to release us from this isur. The Gemara says that, going back to the question brought out, how about mamzer? A mamzer is much worse than an Ammoni or Moavi, because Ammoni and Moavi, after the third generation, can convert. It's only the first three that cannot. However, a mamzer who has a child second generation is still a mamzer, third, the fourth, they continue to be mamzerim. They are not accepted as Jews. They cannot convert at any time. This applies to mamzer or mamzeret, male and female. The question is, if we have chas v'shalom, there are cases of mamzerim, how can a person after the third or fourth generation know what happened 4 generations ago, 5, 8 generations ago? How does a person know whether he's marrying a mamzeret? How does a girl know if she's marrying a mamzer? You can keep track only up to 3 generations, a grandchild. You know who the grandfather is. How can you know who the 5th generation back is? So, since they were mamzerim, you might have people assimilating as mamzerim that the entire you have a whole city or a whole section of Jews becoming illegal, mamzerim. Through marriage, the children are all mamzerim, chas v'shalom. This could destroy the kedusha, the sanctity of the whole Jewish nation, chas v'shalom. Yevamos says there's one assurance we have against that. In that we know that mamzerim do not live. They die young. There's no long life to mamzerim. They die in their youth. So the Yevamos says, the Yevamos asks, no, they die in their youth, there's no problem of them marrying others and so on. The Yevamos asks, if they die when they're young, then why should we be worried about mamzerim being forbidden forever, always, if they won't live that long? Why do we have to have that rule that they're forbidden? The Yevamos answers, the point is that in order to avoid this danger, in order to protect the Jews, the danger of mamzerim, there is a nature given to mamzerim in heaven that they die young. But this nature, this blessing of death is given only if the mamzer is not publicized, if he is not known. If it's a secret that he's a mamzer, then he dies young. If it is publicized that this person is a mamzer, then he's automatically shunned by everyone. They know this family is mamzerim. They're blacklisted. In that case, they could live because they no longer present a danger to the Jews. This generation knows mamzerim. The next one lists that same family as mamzerim, so that no one will ever marry them. They'll be the ostracized, kept aside from the Jewish community. But if a mamzer is not publicized, is not known, then that mamzer will die. Will die young enough not to present a danger to the Jews. The Yevamos says there was a case where Rabbi Ami lived in a certain neighborhood. There's a mamzer in that neighborhood. Rabbi Ami went and made public the fact that this person is a mamzer. Stay away from him. Do not let your daughters marry him, and be sure to keep his name in mind. This mamzer came to Rabbi Ami, crying very bitterly. You embarrassed me, you shamed me, I'm exiled now, I'm cut off from the Jewish community, all because of you. You went and spoke to the neighborhood about me. You've harmed me. Rabbi Ami said, I didn't harm you at all. I gave you life. The fact that I publicized you means that you now have life. So I did you a favor, because otherwise, if you are hidden, if it's not known, if your background is not known, your yachas, your status is not known, and you automatically die young. The fact that I publicized you, I've literally given you life. So why cry? I've done you a favor, great favor. The Yevamos says that there are a certain group called Netinim, Give Onim, a tribe of Arabs, where the Torah says that they cannot become part of the Jews too. Who decreed this? King David said they could never become part of the Jews, though Yehoshua originally accepted them, let them live. When Yehoshua entered Eretz Yisrael, he was told to wipe out these 7 Arab nations, destroy every one of them. The Giv Onim were part of those 7 nations. and they tricked Yehoshua into making a treaty with them to allow them to live. This was through a ruse. They pretended that they lived very far away. They were not part of the 7 nations. And since they're not part of them, they were able to make a peace treaty with Yehoshua. When he found out that they had lied to him, it was too late already. He had already signed a treaty with them. He had given them a word that they would be allowed to live, but he made them servants, slaves, water carriers for the Jews. So that's why they remained alive, but they remained as servants to the Jews. Well, later on, in the days of David HaMelech, something very serious occurred, where King David said, henceforth, they'll never be allowed to convert and become part of the Jews. They are not fit to be part of our nation. This is what happened. During the time of Shaul HaMelech, he was king. He was pursuing David HaMelech in jealousy. He wanted to kill him. David HaMelech fled and went to the city of Nov, where the Kohanim were. He begged them to give him some food. This they gave him against the wishes of King Shaul. When King Shaul came and found out about this, he killed every one of the Kohanim in the city of Nov. This brought down an anger from heaven. The fact that through King David, the Kohanim in Nov were put to death. So when King David became king, at a certain period, there was a gezerah from heaven that there should be a famine. This famine lasted for 3 years. The pasuk says 3 years, year after year. What is meant by year after year? David HaMelech began to investigate the fact, try to discover the reason for this famine. First year, he inquired about, but he said perhaps it's due to avodah zarah, because the pasuk says, if you will worship idols, then Hashem will be angry, and will be no rain. This can cause a drought and a famine. So he inspected, he examined, he investigated among the Givonim, and he found that there was no avodah zarah. Second year passed by, there is still a famine. Any question perhaps is due to Zunut, because we find that the pasuk again says there, that Zunut too causes a famine. He found that this too was lacking. Third year passed by. During the third year he questioned the possibility that there are people who at a time of an appeal pledge a certain amount of money and they do not pay up their pledge. This too brings down the anger of Hashem, and there is a famine. We found there were no such people around who did that, who pledged during the time of an appeal and did not give. So he said, in that case, then I must apply for information directly from Hashem through the Ulim V'Tumim, the chest plate of the Kohen Gadol, where I will find out the reason for this famine. The answer came back from Hashem. There are 2 reasons for this gezerah. One is the fact that Shaul HaMelech, Shaul HaTzadik, was buried without the proper honors. There was not the right degree of kavod for a king, a tzadik, and this brought down the anger of Hashem. That's one thing. Second thing is the crime of Shaul HaMelech in having killed the Givonim. Though he killed the Kohanim, the city of Nov, we consider him having killed the Givonim for 2 reasons. One, there were 7 Givonim there too. 7 who were put to death besides the Kohanim. And secondly, the Givonim were the ones who supplied the food, that is the Kohanim were the ones who supplied the food to the Givonim, and by taking away this food from them, this is like hurting the Givonim. So for these 2 crimes we have this drought. How to go about correcting this? The Menachem said we cannot correct the first one. We cannot undo the fact that the funeral was without kavod. But let's at least appease the Givonim by having them forgive us. Then Hashem will remove his anger. So He called the Givonim to himself, and he told them, this is the case, the Jews are suffering because of you, because of the harm that was done to you by King Shaul. We ask your pardon. What do you wish? We're willing to give you anything to appease you. Any amount of money that you state as ransom, we'll pay you. The Givonim answered, we don't want any money, silver, gold, or anything. We want lives. We want 7 of King Shaul's sons to pay with their lives for the Givonim that were killed. King David pleaded with them to no avail. He pleaded and pleaded, and they refused to listen. They said, we want their lives and nothing else. There was no alternative. So he was obligated, compelled to select sons of Shaul HaMelech and to have them put to death and to have their bodies hung for all to see that we have paid for the sin of the act of Shaul HaMelech. But the Melech was so angry with the Givonim that they showed such a lack of mercy that he said, from here on in, we decree that no one of the Givonim can ever become part of the Jewish nation, because the Jewish nation possesses, the Jewish people possess 3 qualities, 3 characteristics. One is that they are Rachmanim. They have mercy, they have kindness, they have pity on anyone. They are not hard-hearted. They have very soft hearts. Second is that they are Baishanim. They are shy. They're embarrassed. They're soft. Third is they are Gomrei Chasadim. They will do kindness with anyone, whether it's giving charity, whether it's giving a loan, whether it's helping a person with advice, helping a person at any time with anything he needs. These are the qualities, the 3 qualities of the Jews. If a person has these 3 qualities, it shows that he is a Jew. And this is one that you should associate with, attach yourself to. One who does not have these qualities is not fit to be associated with. Therefore, we don't want to be associated with and give on him. We will not accept them into our ranks, into our midst. This is the reason that the give on him were expelled from the potential gerut with the Jews. Now the problem arises. He had to select 7 of Shaul HaMelech's sons, or many more than 7. How do you go about it random, picking out 7 people to put them to death? Why one or why not the other? And how can you judge? Here's a case of a judge who has to sentence to death 7 people among so many. Which one is picked out? Of course, he couldn't take it upon himself. So the Melech said, we'll take them all and have them march by the Aron Kodesh. The Aron Kodesh itself will magnetize those that are selected. The 7 that the Aron will draw to itself, those are the 7 that will die. And that's exactly how he did it. Question is now, interesting point. The Aharon asked, why do we say that the one that the Aron is kolet, draws to itself, that's the one that gets death? The Aron is holy. We would say that the one that it draws to itself should be like the Tevah of Noach. It draws to itself the ones whose lives are saved. The ones that it rejects are the ones that should be put to death. The answer is that there are 2 holy articles in the Bet HaMikdash. One is the Aron Kodesh, and the other is the Mizbeach. In the case of the Mizbeach, we find that Mizbeach stands for life. A person commits a crime, he kills by the shogeg, unintentionally, but he murders somebody, and he goes to the Bet HaMikdash, and he stands by the Mizbeach, the altar. Then the altar is kolet, it saves him. He cannot be put to death. Even by the Goel Hadam, the relative of the victim who has a right to kill the murderer, the one who killed Bishogig unintentionally. The relative may kill him until he reaches the cities of refuge, the Miklat. But if this murderer goes to the Mizbeach saves him. His life is spared there. Mizbeach is something that brings peace between the Jews and Hashem. It's a symbol of peace. That's why the sacrifice is called a korban. That means to bring close. It's mikarev, the Jews to Hashem. The Mizbeach is the symbol of peace, whereas the Aharon is the symbol of death. We find that the Leviim were the ones who carried the Aharon during their journey in the Midbar, and always there was death among the Leviim. The Aharon is so dangerous that any slight infringement on the kavod of the Aharon would bring about the death of the Leviim. When King David was bringing the Aharon to the Beit HaMikdash, and one of his servants, Uzzah, happened to leap forward to catch the Aharon when he thought it was falling, he was killed. Because the Aharon is so holy that it would bring death to any person who wouldn't give it the proper degree of respect. So therefore, in this case, to select those who were chosen for death, he had to walk past the Aharon Kodesh. Those 7 that were drawn by the Aharon, those were the 7 that were put to death. The Gemara says that the Melech had pity on the grandson of King Shaul. He was very closely befriended with Yonatan, the son of Shaul. Yonatan had a son, Mephibosheth, and the Melech was very kindly towards him. He wanted to save him. So he did not let him walk past the Aharon. So the Gemara asks, this is very unfair. This is not justifiable. By what right does he exempt this one from walking past? Let the Aharon be the one to decide. How can he save this one? Perhaps by not bringing him past the Aharon, he's causing the death of somebody else who might have been saved and have him taken. So the Gemara answers that he did let him go past the Aharon Kodesh, but he was mitpalel. The Aharon Kodesh did draw Mephibosheth, but he prayed to Hashem to release him. The Gemara says, if the Aharon did draw him close, he was selected, he was convicted by the Aharon, again he's committing a crime by taking him away and giving an innocent victim instead. The Gemara answers finally what happened was that he let him go past the Aharon, but he was mitpalel. Don't let the Aharon take this one. That's legal. Because he didn't walk past like the others. He's mitpalel for him this sheep may do. He can pray for anybody. As long as the Aharon did not take him, that means that the 7 the Aharon did take, those are the ones that were convicted and sentenced to death, and the death sentence carried out. The Gemara says, how can we say, this is a big question, how could we say that the 7 innocent sons of Shaul HaMelech were put to death for a crime that Shaul HaMelech committed? Before we go further, I want to stress once more, this I state emunah shleimah, my simple emunah, and I advise everyone to have this emunah, as is brought in the Kutei Maran. Arizal says that a person who is pure in emunah should believe implicitly that one who is a tzadik in lo ta'am tam chet, never tasted what a sin, never knows the taste of sin, never committed a sin. A person should never say that tzadikim really committed a sin. Moshe Rabbeinu did not commit any sin when he struck the rock. That was called a pagam, and of course that would be ridiculous for persons of our caliber to dare to say about Moshe Rabbeinu he committed a sin. But every person knows, no matter how small, if Hashem would say to you, talk to the rock, you would do it. There's no big sacrifice involved. So, of course, Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest of all Jews that ever lived, would certainly do that. Therefore, there was something much deeper than just saying he struck the rock instead of speaking to it. These are sodot brought in the Zohar Kadosh, who speaks about the topic of speaking to the rock and striking the rock, which means drawing out the waters of Torah in a certain manner. Same thing with David HaMelech. The Gemara says in Shabbat, that he who thinks that one committed a sin with Bathsheba is committing a grievous mistake, an error. Not just that Bathsheba was legally his, destined to be his, and Bathsheba was not married to Uriah, she was divorced. Aside from all that, above all, David HaMelech did not have any Yetzer Hara. He had already destroyed the Yetzer Hara. Libi Halal Mikirbi, the Yetzer Hara was, Halal was a corpse in his heart. His heart was a vacuum, empty of the Yetzer Hara. There was no sin by David HaMelech. The same applies to Shlomo HaMelech. No such thing as having desires for women, because that desire for women is only the lowliest materialistic type of person who has that. If King Solomon was the wisest of all men, the real Chokhmah means Chokhmah in Torah, Chokhmah in Mitzvot, Chokhmah in understanding what is right and what is wrong. So one who is so wise, wiser than all people, surely knows how to avoid the wiles, tricks of the Yetzer Hara, the lowly type of the Yetzer Hara. That's the real Megusham, the got you. So that too, there was no physical sin involved. This is what we call in the Sifrei Kabbalah as Eyana Givurot, and to be mamtik these Givurot, to sweeten the harshness that's above, to go over the chesed on the din. Same thing too in the Shaul HaMelech, where the pasuk itself testifies to the fact that Ben Shana Shaul HaMelech, King Shaul, when he was about to pass away, was as pure as the day he was born. And even Shmuel HaNavi said to him, tomorrow, Nachara Ta'imi, you'll be with me in my high level of Gan Eden. So surely no case of actual crimes there. All these things are sodot, secrets of Torah. We have to learn them as pshat, simply, but to believe implicitly that these tzaddikim never committed a sin. And I stated before, I state this very emphatically. When a person comes to the Bet Din Shel Mara, there he has the Mekatregim. That means those angels who oppose him, Chas v'Shalom, try to convict him, but he has a Sanei Gorim, the angels who defend him. That's a mitzvah that a person does, defend him there. Anyone can be defended by a mitzvah that he did, or by tzaddikim above. There's no question about it. But if a person truly believes, for example, that David HaMelech was a pure tzaddik, never committed a sin, when he comes to the Bet Din Shel Mara, he'll be repaid, rewarded, by having David HaMelech himself defend him there. He will say, you defended me while you were on earth, you defended my kavod, I'll defend you in the Bet Din Shel Mara. Very good to have such lawyers there. So here we speak about the crime of Shaul HaMelech. That's only in a term being used. Has to be shown to take that literally. I repeat this to keep this in mind while we speak about it. So here the question the Gemara asks is, how could the sons of Shaul HaMelech pay for the crime of Shaul HaMelech? Why should they die for something which they never committed, something which their father did? The Gemara answers, this is true. Volume 2, Avot Al-Banim, fathers cannot pay for the crimes of the children, and children will not pay for the crimes of the fathers. One will not die for the other. But though the pasuk says this, the Gemara says it is worth, the Torah holds it is worth having kaviyachol, this pasuk, ripped out, torn out, disobeyed, and not to cause a chilul Hashem. The chilul Hashem would be that people would say always about the Jews, look at how cruel they are. Imagine that their king killed innocent victims, it would bring about a chilul Hashem. So better to break this law of having children die for their parents, as long as it will bring kavod shemayim, to show that the Jews follow justice, and the law follows justice, that if one committed a crime, let that crime be paid for, even though it was committed against goyim, against givonim. So the Gemara says, we understand that. But then the next pasuk says that they let these victims hang. And the Torah says you cannot let a victim, person who died, hang overnight. How come that they hung for days and days, in fact for a whole season? The Gemara answers again, let the law be disobeyed, as though tearing the law out of the Torah, as long as to bring kavod to heaven. Because the people would pass by, or you would pass by, and they would say, who are these? They would tell them, these are the ones who paid for the fact that they killed, their father killed goyim. These people would say, what a wonderful nation this is. Imagine that. This wasn't an ordinary person. It was a king who did it. They did it to goyim, and still there's such vengeance taken from him. How wonderful it is to attach themselves to this nation. The result was that 150,000 Gerim were added to the Jews, converted because of this Kiddush Shem Shemayim. This was the result of the story of the Givonim, final tally, in which we bring out again that above all is the quality of mercy and kindness the Yehudim didn't have, which Jews are supposed to have, and which do possess. It's those we should attach ourselves to. We continue the Shi'ur in Gemara. Gemara says that the words of the Torah are so sacred that nobody has a right to change any word in the Torah whatsoever, not even a letter in the Torah. For example, we find in the case of Shlomo HaMelech, where the Torah says, Lo yarbeh lo nashim, lo yarbeh lo susim, the king may not have more than a certain specified number of wives or a certain specified number of horses. Wives and horses usually go together. Some kind of similarity. So King Solomon said, I can take a larger number and it will not harm me. So we find that the Yud, the Yevamos says the Yud, came before Hashem and said, King Solomon wants to take me out of the Torah. Instead of Yarbeh, Rabah, means he increased his number. So Hashem said 1,000 King Solomons will be torn away, torn out, but not one letter in my Torah will be erased. So here we see that nobody, no matter how great, can change a letter, a word, a statement of the Torah. Which means even the Bet Din does not have the power to change anything to the Torah. The Gemara asks now, Rabbi Eliezer said, I have heard cases where the Bet Din had the power to punish people even though the Torah did not say that this was a crime, and to make additional laws even where the Torah did not say so. For example, there was a case where a man rode on a horse on Shabbat. On Shabbat there are 39 melachot, 39 types of acts that are forbidden. Anyone breaking one of those 39, where there are witnesses and warning, the penalty is death by stoning, sekilah. But if a person does a minor infraction on Shabbat, there is no death penalty for it. If he does an isur de rabbanan, there's no death penalty for it. Now, in this case, to ride a horse on Shabbat is a law of the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan said a person cannot ride a horse on Shabbat. Why? Because he might rip off a branch from a tree and use it to ride the horse with. Breaking off a branch from a tree is a major law. Riding a horse is a minor law, but forbidden because he might do it before a major law. Well, certainly if a man rides a horse on Shabbat, you can't give him death for it. He's not breaking one of the 39 major laws. Rabbi Eliezer said, I know the case, a man rode on a horse on Shabbat, and he was brought before the Bet Din, and they stoned him. They gave him a death penalty. Not that the law says so, but because at that time there was a laxity among people, and in order to strengthen the laws of Shabbat, the Bet Din said we must make an example of this person. We allow this to happen, others will fall into a laxity where they might begin breaking all the laws of Shabbat. We show that this person gets a death penalty, people will fear the Shabbat and will not break even the minor laws. But we do see a case here where Bet Din did something which the Torah does not prescribe. Second case is where a man and his wife had relations in the woods, outside of the house. This was not a strange woman. This was not one unrelated to him. This was his own wife. And still, the Beit Din took that man and punished him by giving him 39 lashes. Malkut is given only when a person breaks one of the laws of the Torah. Now, again, why? Because of the fact that people were becoming very permissive, and there was, again, a letdown in the tzniut and modesty. So in order to make an example of this person, teach others that they must conduct themselves properly, the Beit Din gave him 39 lashes. How come? The question is, how come we find here that the Beit Din did go against the laws of the Torah? The Torah says you do not give death penalty for riding a horse. You do not give 39 lashes in case a person did something which is not one of the 613 laws of the Torah or the 365 negative laws, the laws which require that a 39 lash penalty for, and they did it. The other answer is that in this case, where we find that the laws of the Torah are in danger, in jeopardy of being broken, the Torah gives the Beit Din, the rabbis, the power to create, to build a fence around these laws in order to strengthen these laws. This is a power that the Beit Din did not take upon themselves. The Torah gives them that power. Now, for example, the Rambam gives us this in a logical sense. The Rambam says that, for example, a doctor who wants to cure a person who has gangrene, blood poisoning. This person will die because of blood poisoning. The doctor amputates the person's arm or leg. He's doing something that's harming the person. What kind of a doctor is that who instead of curing goes and cuts off a man's arm? But the reason behind it is to save the entire body. So though it seems that he's harming the person, he is still actually curing him, curing his life, saving his life. By the same token, we find, again, using the same logic, we find that if a person is very ill and he is in danger of dying from this illness, and this is on Shabbat. Shabbat is the most important mitzvah in the Torah, and yet it is that a person may break Shabbat in order to save this ill person's life. How can you break Shabbat? For what? A person should keep the Shabbat regardless. The answer is that we're going to save something. What are we going to save? We're going to save the Shabbat. Because if you break the Shabbat now, today, this Shabbat, save that person's life, he will live. Next Shabbat, he'll be able to observe Shabbat. 2 weeks later, again will observe Shabbat, and so on. So by breaking this one Shabbat, you will then have a lot of Shabbats kept by this very same person, who, if he observes this Shabbat, he'll have one to his credit. But the next one, and the one afterwards, he won't be around anymore. He will not have that mitzvah anymore to be obeyed. So we're cutting off the Shabbat, it's true. We're breaking the Shabbat now. And we're doing it for the sake of Shminat Shabbat, Shminat Shabbatot, observing many Shabbats later. Here too, the rabbi said, we're breaking a law. We're giving a man a death penalty where he doesn't deserve it. But why? Because we're going to save a lot of other death penalties from taking place. If we don't show strong form now, we don't show a very severe discipline to the Jews, then it's possible that the entire set of laws maybe just crumble. And we'll have a lot of people who break the original 39 acts, a lot of death penalties meted out. So this is the case when the Beit Din is given the power, it is empowered by heaven to go against a law that Torah seemingly, but they're not really going against it. They are, with their act, they are strengthening the laws of the Torah. Therefore, in this case, it is permissible. Yevamos says, one time, Rabbi Elazar who was a student of Rabbi Yochanan, came into the yeshiva. Rabbi Yochanan wasn't there, and he stated a law. Statement for the Gemara, a law that he had learned from Rabbi Yochanan, his rabbi. He said this to the entire yeshiva, but he did not credit Rabbi Yochanan with this statement. He said it on his own, without saying, I heard it from Rabbi Yochanan. Later, Rabbi Yochanan heard about this, and he had quoted him without giving credit for it, said it on his own. Rabbi Yochanan was very angry. Rabbi Yochanan is angry, it's dangerous. Because when a tzadik is angry, it can cause a lot of harm. We find that Rabbi Yochanan's greatest student, his closest disciple, Rish Lakish, once made Rabbi Yochanan angry by a simple statement in a question of law. Rabbi Yochanan's anger caused Rish Lakish to become fatally ill and pass away. At a different time, we find Rabbi Yochanan looked at another student. The student passed away. Rabbi Yochanan's anger was very dangerous. Two rabbis, Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi, also two students of Rabbi Yochanan, came into Rabbi Yochanan, and they said to Rabbi Yochanan, in order to appease his anger, they said to him, wasn't there a case once in Tiberias, many years back, when there was a machloket about a certain halacha, a certain question of whether an item is the hinge of a door, if it's muktzah on Shabbat or not. If it's removed from the door, is it an article that can be used on Shabbat, or is it muktzah? Machloket between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yossi. This is a different Rabbi Elazar, years back, in Tanaim. They argued about this with such intensity that they had a Sefer Torah they were trying to prove from, and in their argument they both pulled on it, and the Sefer Torah was torn because of their anger. Which means not they tore it deliberately, chas v'shalom, but each one pointed at it to show that he was right. It was torn, which was a rough sign. And standing there was Rabbi Yossi ben Kismer, who said, if there is such anger in a yeshiva, in this place, this was a shul, a knesset, a knis. He said, I am certain that this knis is someday going to turn into a place of worship for Goyim, for Avodah Zarah. And just as he said, that's what happened later on. So we see what anger can cause over even words of Torah. Yochanan heard this, and this time he became extremely angry. He said to Rabbi Asi, how dare you make a comparison like this? There, the wrongdoing was that there were two equals, two friends, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yossi, two friends who were arguing. They were not allowed to show anger one to the other. There was no reason. There was no justification for their anger. How do you compare this to a case where here's a student of mine does something to dishonor me, discredit me? Surely a rabbi has the right to be angry at a student. How do you dare to make the comparison as though he was my friend? You're saying this is the same case. You're taking a student and placing him in my category. This pointed to his full greater danger because Yochanan became so much more angry now. Now the Gemara says that the Yaakov Bar Idi came in to see Rabbi Yochanan to offer his words of appeasement to calm him down. And he said to Rabbi Yochanan, let's notice the fact that in the pasuk, the Torah, it says, that the pasuk says, just as Hashem commanded Moshe Rabbeinu, so did Moshe Rabbeinu command Yehoshua. And that's exactly what Yehoshua did. He did not miss out on one word of everything that Hashem had commanded Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, which means that Yehoshua taught to the Jews what he had learned from Moshe Rabbeinu. What did he learn from Moshe Rabbeinu? Everything he knew. There was nothing he got elsewhere. Everything Yehoshua knew he got from Moshe Rabbeinu. Now when you say that when Yehoshua taught the Jews Torah, that every word he would say, this is what Moshe Rabbeinu said. He would reject every sentence he said, Moshe Rabbeinu said. He would teach Torah straight. And it was understood that these words are taken from Moshe Rabbeinu because he was his disciple. Now here too, when Rabbi Elazar, your student, said a certain halacha, without saying where he got it from, everyone knows he's your disciple. Whatever he says, they know comes from you. So it's not necessary to say it. If this was a strange student who heard something from you, he would have to repeat it in your name, because they wouldn't know where he got his halacha from. But everyone here knows that Elazar is your student. His words are your words. That's why it wasn't necessary to say it, just as it wasn't necessary for Yeshua to say it in the name of Moshe Rabbeinu. Yochanan heard this, he said, why don't the others learn how to appease as nicely, as beautifully, as Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi? The Gemara asks, why was Rabbi Yochanan so angry in the first place? Why was he so upset over the fact that Rabbi Elazar stated a halacha, a din, and didn't give him credit for it? What is so important about giving him credit for it? Surely he didn't want kavod. He was not out for kavod. There must be a different reason. Yochanan was a tzadik, didn't look for his own kavod. There must be a different reason why he was so particular about having his name mentioned as the source for this din which Rabbi, or the statement which Rabbi Elazar made. Yevamos says, yes, there is a definite positive reason, a very, very important one, important for every one of us to know. There's a pasuk in Tehillim where King David says, I pray to Hashem, I pray to Hashem that I should live in two worlds. Two worlds, not Olam Hazeh, and then I should go to Gan Eden. That's not two worlds. This means two worlds simultaneously, at the same time. I should have life in Olam Haba and Olam Hazeh at the very same time. The question is, how can a person live in two worlds simultaneously? The answer is that King David prayed to Hashem, after I pass away, may it be your will that people should make statements of Torah in my name. Because when they will mention my name, then I'll be alive in Olam Hazeh too. Though I'll be in Gan Eden, I'll be living in this world too. Not because my name is mentioned, but because when a person mentions a statement said by a tzadik who has passed away, and mentions that tzaddik's name, then in the grave, the tzaddik's lips move. Repeat that statement. It actually comes to life. There's a neshama. The Torah is neshama. It's given into this person, into this tzaddik, and his lips move, which means that he is again living in this world. He is brought to life in this world. This was the tefillah of the Noach. Be zocher to live in this world, though he is in Gan Eden, to live in two worlds simultaneously. This is a very big zechut for the neshama of that tzaddik who passed away. This is the reason why Rabbi Yochanan was so particular about this, so upset by it, because he wanted to have his name mentioned as credit for that statement, so that after his passing, when people would repeat this statement, they would say that Rabbi Yochanan said this, and when they would say it, his lips would then move in the grave. He'd come back to life on earth too. He'd live on both worlds. This is why it's so important to speak of the origin. Who was the original person who said this statement? Mentioning that person's name, and thereby bringing him back to life. Yevamos says that a Kohen goes to a certain place called Bet HaGemanot, where they dole out, they distribute the Tinumah. Tinumah is the holy section of food that's taken off the field, given to the Kohen. Now there it goes out to the Kohanim. But a Kohenet, a woman Kohen, cannot go there and receive Tirumah. This is not given out to the women. But then the Kohen takes the Tirumah and he goes home and gives it to the women in his home. The woman cannot go to this place to receive Tirumah. But there is also another kind of holy food, which is called Maaser Ani, a tenth of the crops that's given to the poor. There, in this case, when this is handed out, it's handed out to poor women also. In this case, women are included. They receive their portion of this distribution of the Maaser. Not only that, but when this Maaser is handed out, it must be given to the women first. Ladies first. Why? Because there is a certain sense of shame, degradation, embarrassment for the poor. So we must release the women from this shame. In other words, let them get their Maaser and leave quickly so that they stand this shame for much less a period of time. The men could stand our mind away and go through this embarrassment for a longer period. We do not want women to suffer embarrassment more than is necessary. They should be given this Maaser first so that they have the shortest possible period of embarrassment. Even it says that Rav said, Rav was the chief rabbi in his city, and actually he was the judge. People came to him for court cases. Rav said, when I had two cases come before me, one was a case with a man against a man. The other was a case where a woman was involved. So I said, I always would say, I will handle the case of the man first, because the man is more important. The man studies Torah, more kavod should be given to the man. Then when I heard about this law, that women should be considered, the feelings of women should be considered embarrassment, so I decided that when it comes to court cases, take the woman first to be able to release her that more quickly from having to stand trial in court. It's embarrassing. A woman to be seen in public on a thing like this. This court case is, in some cases, embarrassing. So get the woman out first, that she can be freed from this bushat, this embarrassing situation, and let the man wait. Though the man is maybe more important because he's a ben Torah, but a man can tolerate, can suffer embarrassment more easily than a woman could. Yevamos says that if there were 10 Kohanim standing in a group, one of those Kohanim, we don't know which one, left that group and had relations with a Jewish woman, and she became pregnant, the child was born. Now, we do not know who the father of that child is. We never confirmed, we never ascertained which one of those 10 Kohanim was the father of this child. We do know, however, positively, that this child was born to a Kohen. His father was a Kohen. Who the father was, we don't know. Which Kohen, but he was a Kohen. In this case, the Yevamos says that the child is not given the right to serve as a Kohen. He cannot, he's a kosher child. He had a Jewish father and a Jewish mother. Speaking about, of course, a woman who was not married. But although this child is born a Kohen, he cannot serve in the Bet HaMikdash as a Kohen. Why? The reason is, as the pasuk which says that the Kehuna shall be given, this power of Kohen shall be given to Aharon HaKohen, Ulazar'o Acharav, and his children after him. After him means we know who his children are. You must have the absolute knowledge of who the child's father is before he's allowed to retain that power of Kehuna, that privilege of being able to serve in the Bet HaMikdash. If we don't know exactly who his father is, he cannot serve in the Bet HaMikdash. This is the law the Gemara states. Now the Gemara asks, that's strange. We have another pasuk, the case of Avraham Avinu, where Hashem said that to you I will be Hashem to you, u'lezeracha acharecha, and to your children after you. Again, your children after you means that you have to know who the child's father is. Now, what are we worried about in the case of a Yisrael? In the case of a Kohen, we have to know who the father is because of the law of serving in the Bet HaMikdash. In the case of a Yisrael, why is that so important? What was Avraham being warned about? Be careful about your children after you. Even it says very simply, he was being warned, he, meaning he and all Jews afterwards, your children after you, that the children should be yours, do not marry, do not have relations with a goyah. Because when a Jew has relations with a goyah, the children are not his. They are not his children. They are considered goyim. They follow the mother. So this is the warning to Avraham Avinu, to Yisrael. Speaking here about Zeracha Acharecha, your children should be like you, follow you, Jews like you, only if you marry a Jewish woman, not a Goya. The question is, after this warning, Hashem gave to Avraham Avinu, we find that he married Hagar. Hagar, the maid, who was not Jewish. If she was a maid, she could not be Jewish, unless she was freed. When a non-Jewish maid or servant is freed, they automatically are given, converts to become Jewish. So, how could he have married Hagar? Therefore, we must say that before marriage, he must have freed her from the law of maid. She could have still served in the house, but he gave her her freedom, which made her a Giyonit, convert. He was able to marry her. Now the question is, though, the second and stronger question, how can we say that he married her even after he freed her, which means that she was converted? We have a law in the Torah which says that an Egyptian cannot convert. The Egyptian cannot be considered part of the Jews' new conversion. There's Egyptian self-conversion. Later on, different generations that come from him have different laws. But an Egyptian self-converts is not considered a Jew enough to be able to marry a Jew. The Egyptian convert cannot marry a Jew. Hagar was an Egyptian. How could Avraham Avinu have married Hagar, even though he had converted her? The answer is that, in the first place, the law of an Egyptian not being accepted as a convert began only after the Jews were in Egypt. Because of the fact that the Egyptians threw the Jewish children into the river, because of this, the decree was given out that the Egyptians cannot be accepted as converts among Jews. But before the Egyptians committed this crime, then certainly it was permissible to convert them. The Egyptians living before that time did not have this ruling against them. And therefore, it was possible for Abraham to marry Hagar, though she was an Egyptian and had converted. The Gemara says, in case of Yael, let's get the story clear first. When Devorah and Neviah ruled over the Jews, Devorah, the prophetess, woman prophet, who acted as the ruler of the Jews at that time, and the Jews were beset by this war in which General Sisera. General Sisera was an all-powerful general who tormented the Jews at that time. He had a powerful army, and he had armor, coaches made of armor, and the Jews were suffering very severely through Sisera. Finally, the Torah told her general Barak to mobilize the Jewish army and go into battle against Sisera. Barak was willing to go if the Torah would go with them and pray for them. But in this battle, Sisera's army was defeated. But this evil general Sisera himself escaped. And then he escaped in order to go back to his land, regroup, and then go about trying to recoup his losses. On his way, he stopped off. He was very tired. He was exhausted. And he had to stop for a rest. He came to a small hut in the woods. And there lived a woman named Yael. Yael, the wife of Cheved Akeni. She was a very great tzadik. This woman recognized Sisera, and she invited him in to her home. In the pasuk, we just learned about the fact that she fed him warm milk, put him to sleep, and then she nailed his head to the ground. When Barak came, she showed him what she had done to Sisera. The Yevamos says that's not exactly what happened. Sisera was a very dangerous character. Sisera was anxious to stay there for a moment and then leave. Had he left immediately, he would have escaped. They would have presented the same danger as before. It was Yael's task to detain him, hold him back, keep him there, put him to sleep, and to eradicate him. How could she do this? What power could she wield over him? The Yevamos says that she was forced to stoop so low as to seduce him into having relations with her. This way, to weaken him. This is what the Yevamos says here. By weakening him in his relations, she was then able to put him to sleep and to kill him. The Yevamos asks, but how can she be allowed to do that? She's committing a very vile, serious sin. Relations with a goy. Not only that, but a sin is a sin if there's pleasure out of it. Surely in relations, she had pleasure too. Even it says, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai Arizal says, any good that comes from a rasha is bad for a tzadik. He has no pleasure from it. Proof is that Hashem said to Lavan when he was chasing Yaakov, he said to Lavan, don't speak to Yaakov at all, good or bad. Well, we can understand Hashem saying to Lavan, don't speak badly to Yaakov. Why should he say don't speak good? Because the good that comes from an Hashem is also bad for a tzaddik. And then it says, what is the comparison? There by Yaakov, the good means that if he wants to bless Yaakov, what would he say? Cursing him would be bad. Blessing would be good. But that good is bad because in blessing he would say, using the name of his idol to bless Yaakov with, which is bad for Yaakov. Wouldn't want that. But here, what kind of bad do you have here? Here it's a physical pleasure. Physical pleasure. Yael would have had physical pleasure. This would constitute a very serious sin. He then answers that this was no pleasure, because this meant that he would be injecting into her a poisonous venom. The relation from a goy means that she receives from him that venom which comes from the tipah, a drop comes from the brain. The evil brain of a rasha is like poison. So there's no pleasure at all possible. It's very distasteful, very repugnant. You have to undergo this, to receive this tipah from this rasha. Because you find proof in a case where when the Nachash, the serpent, came to Chava to induce her to eat from the tree of wisdom, he overcame her by injecting this venom into her. A sort of relations. You cannot use the word relations there because they were spiritual. But the sort of merging of the spirit and injecting part of his spirit into her, and from this part of the spirit later was born Cain. That's why Cain had the killer instinct in him, because he was partially begotten through the Nachash, the serpent, who was the angel of death. Now, the Jews, so this venom remained in Chava, which means that anyone born from her later on had part of this tum'ah. Now, this remained in all people until the Jews stood at Har Sinai. Mount Sinai, when they received the Torah, they got rid of all this poison of the Nachash. Only the Jews who stood at Mount Sinai got rid of this. The Goyim who were not there still retained that poison. And therefore here, what pleasure could there be for Yael if she was receiving some of this venom from Sisera? Therefore there was no sin involved. It was the greatest sacrifice on her part to save the Jews by undergoing something so distasteful, so repulsive, in something which might ordinarily be considered pleasure. Might. In this case it was the extreme opposite. For the sake of saving the Jews, this was what's known as a sin, which was bigger, holier than an ordinary mitzvah. Her act, which seems to be called sin, was greater than another person's greatest mitzvah. Very important to point out, though, that this is the Gemara statement here, that there was this relation between Yael and Sisera. The Midrash says the Feirush very clearly that the Pasuk says, this is all derived from the Pasuk, that Sisera came and he bent before her, and then she covered him with a blanket. So the Midrash says she covered him with a blanket. It's the only place we ever find a blanket in terms smicha, used a covering for a blanket. Smicha spelled with a shin. Smicha. The Midrash says, why does the Pasuk use the term smicha for a blanket instead of another form, a keset or a kisui, many other forms that we use ordinarily? Why use the term smicha to show we said the letter sin or shin? And actually goes smicha is two words, shemi, ko. Spelling the two words shemi, ko. My name is here, Hashem said. And my name is present, as my name is pure. That's how pure Yael was. Asmi Shalom, this Rasha never touched her. Just as Achashverosh never touched Queen Esther, that's how in truth Yael was never touched by this Rasha Sisera. So that here we say either that there is a machloket between the Gemara and the Midrash, two opinions, or the truth is as the Midrash says, and the Gemara speaks of it as a denush. Theoretically, if a case like this would happen, it would still be a mitzvah for the tzadik who would do this. To elaborate a little more on the point about the Nachash and Chava, the Zohar Kadosh says that Chas v'Shalom, woe is to that person who says or even thinks that the Nachash had actual relations with Chava. Let me not even think that. But then, first place, we say he couldn't get to Chava, because she was holy, she was the creation of Hashem. Second place, we could not use that term of physical relations because they were nothing physical. They were in the form of spirits. Even the Nachash was in the form of an angel. What then? This means that the Nachash possessed a certain power of evil spirit, Tum'ah, where his intentions were that just as spiritually Adam and Chava were married, his intentions were to have Adam commit the sin of eating from the tree of wisdom knowing that thereby he would die, because Hashem said when you eat from the tree of wisdom you'll die. Once Adam would die, then the Nachash would marry Chava, and he would take the place of Adam. He'd elevate himself to the category of Adam. This was the kavanah, the intentions of the Nachash. So that in this act of merging part of his spirit with Chava, the crime was so great. Because of this, the Nachash was ejected, expelled, and his counterpart on earth is the serpent, which was lower than any other animal. The Nachash himself became the angel of evil, the angel of death, the Satan, and forever after until Mashiach comes, when he'll be completely erased, eradicated. But this evil spirit still remained within Chava. So any person afterwards, being born, had to have some of this evil spirit in them. And there was nothing that could take out this evil spirit from Chava or have it eliminated from those born from Chava until the time that the Jews stood at Mount Sinai. What happened then? Then the Seven Elohim was renewed. When Hashem created Adam and Chava, it says that he created them in the form of Hashem, meaning that their soul came from the Shekhinah. It was actually part of the Shekhinah. The time when they received the Torah, there was a new merging then of Hashem and the Jews. This was like Kaviyachol, a wedding of Hashem and the Jews with the Torah as the engagement ring. This was a chuppah, a wedding. So this time, again, there was a renewal of this Selam Elokim, this form of Hashem, this new spirit that was given into them, and this new spirit meant that there was no longer any trace of this Zohana, this filth, this evil spirit that the Nachash had given into Chava. But this was only for those who stood at Mount Sinai. I mean, all the Jews then were purified. All Jews born in the future, born pure. The Goyim who were not there, they're the ones that they still retained this impurity. The Goyim at all times still have this impurity from the Nachash. And that's why the Torah says, this is another reason why it's so dangerous for a person to chas v'shalom have relations with a goya, a woman with a goy, because part of this impurity is drawn into the person having relations with them, and then this could chas v'shalom pass on to later children, Babina. This is another major reason for the isur of ever having this physical relation of merging with a goy. But for the Jews who were at Mount Sinai, they became purified, so that to this day the Jews are a different nation. They are a nation of purity and kedusha, a nation of holiness, especially the tzadikim, the leaders of the Jews, who through their teachings of Torah continually renew the power of the kedusha in the soul of a Jew. They give new life, because the Torah is called Eitz HaChayim, the tree of life. And this continually gives new life, new subsistence to the neshama of a Jew. And with this new life, that's why the Jews are called Am Yisrael Chai. They are a nation of life, whereas the Shaim are called dead during their lifetime. This is the reason why we must always continue to study Torah diligently, and of course study it with the intentions of obeying, carrying out the mitzvot of the Torah, having the proper emunah in the Torah, emunah in Hashem, and emunah in the tzadikim. Till the time will come shortly, we'll be zocher to have a united people with the full recognition of the existence of Hashem as Melech HaOlam. When Mashiach comes, we're zocher to see the coming of Mashiach, the binyan Beit HaMikdash, Mehera b'yameinu, Amen v'yamen.